Lisa reluctantly agreed to stop coming to Richard's apartment for the time being. She had to force herself to focus on her job. Although it was so hard to even understand the situation under which they were taking a break, but Richard never made things easy for her. He never gave her a good reason for his decision except trying to hinge it on what happened on that fateful day. Lisa refused to accept it. There was definitely more to this than met her eyes. And minutes became hours, hours became days, and days became weeks. Each day passed was literally a nightmare for Lisa. She was new to spending a full day alone. There was no day passed that she didn't see Richard, so it was difficult dealing with life without him. Having to stay week in week out without seeing him was just too hard to cope with. Most days, she would fight with the urge to just take a train to his apartment, but somehow she had to refrain herself from towing that path. It was better she respected his wish. She would, however, harmlessly call him a couple of times to check on him, but would always meet a cold response from him which would eventually leave her sober for the rest of that day. She just couldn't wait for this break to be over. And so came the Friday, the day before the present, the day Lisa would live to forget. It was evening, and Lisa just returned from work and was in the kitchen, fixing her dinner when Richard called. She anxiously picked the call but was disappointed to find out he only called to extend an invitation to her for a party to celebrate his latest promotion. It was slated for 12 noon the next day at his apartment. She promised to be there. Of course she would. This was an opportunity to see him again. Maybe this would be the perfect opportunity for them to work things out, she thought. Then came the present day. Lisa woke up late. She worked late into the night to meet deadline to deliver an art piece to a client. She was shocked to realize that the time was already 11 a.m. She quickly dashed to the bathroom, and soon was on her way out. She did a stopover at Venvi to deliver the art piece before boarding a taxi to Richard's apartment, hoping to arrive before other invitees. But contrary to her wish, Richard's apartment was already crowded with his colleagues and friends. Barbara was there. This was the first time Lisa would see her at a social gathering. She was gorgeous in every sense of the word. Her silky demure pink gown was designer for sure, perfectly outlining her figure. Other female guests appeared exquisitely dressed. And so did the male guests, and the host too. Lisa felt odd. She was dressed in a black t-shirt and a blue denim jeans. If only Richard had given her a hint. Anyways, this was the least of her worries. She didn't receive a warm welcome from Richard's friends and colleagues like she used to, even Mike, his closest friend and colleague. He only managed to extend a handshake to her. Worst of all was Richard. He didn't even move a muscle when he saw her walk into the apartment. He couldn't even manage a smile. He just stood there, cold to her but warm to other guests. Lisa stood there, feeling like a total stranger. Maybe coming here was a mistake after all. She should have seen the warning sign from his tone while on the phone the day before. Before she would allow her thoughts linger any further, her attention caught the strangest thing of the day so far. Not only was Barbara cheerful, she never left Richard's side. While Richard addressed his guests, Barbara was by his side. He would occasionally leaning to her side to whisper things in her ears. Lisa couldn't guess what it was that he whispered to Barbara, but whatever it was, must be music to her ears as she giggled, slightly giving him a nudge. Lisa was stunned, and nothing literally made sense as she couldn't make anything of all that was playing before her. They were never close. She had never seen them like that, together. She quickly dismissed the thought, however, but couldn't take her eyes off them. Maybe there was a better explanation for this shenanigan. She promised herself to be patient. Everything would soon be over, or so she thought. Soon, it was time to toast. Mike made the announcement, and glass cups were given to the guests. Lisa declined to collect the glass. Her eyes cut Richard's at that instant, but he looked indifferent and looked away. This made her heart to pound profusely. What was really going on here? Lisa thought. As guests exchanged toasts, Richard called everyone's attention as he walked to the center of the gathering, arm in arm with Barbara, all eyes on them. As soon as they were at the center, Richard freed Barbara's arm and turned to face her. Lisa saw a familiar smile. It was the exact look on his face the first time he kissed her. Her heart sank deeper, her heartbeat tripled. Sweats trickled down both sides of her cheek as she looked on. Richard and Barbara stared at each other intimately as he went on to profess his love for her. Maybe I am not hearing this right, Lisa thought, trying to understand what was happening right in front of her. Before Lisa could realize what was happening, Richard had gone down on one knee before Barbara and took out a beautiful ring box and held it open before Barbara. "Richard," was all Lisa could utter as she stood staring at them in total disbelief. Everyone, including Richard, turned their attention to her. Lisa was staring at the obvious. The die is cast and couldn't stand it any longer. She had seen quite enough. And just as Mike tried to reach out to grab her arm, Lisa ran off and never looked back. And here she was, wandering around the Bevan Street. She was drenched in her own sweat. She felt like screaming but couldn't find her voice. Tears trickled down her cheek. So this was what he meant by taking a break, she pondered. Lisa couldn't believe that after 5 years, Richard could just fling her to the side without provocation. "Where did I go wrong?" she muttered to herself, sobbing. 5 years of chasing clout. "No, I deserve an explanation," she said as she quickly turned and waved down an incoming taxi and quickly hopped in. Soon Lisa was back at Richard's apartment. Just before she could reach for the door, Mike opened it and let her in. She saw that everyone had gone except for Mike and Barbara, of course. As soon as Richard sighted Lisa walk through the door, he broke free from Barbara, his face filled with guilt. Barbara looked away, avoiding eye contact with Lisa, who walked straight to Richard. Mike stood still by the door. The air in the room became still with a deafening silence. Mike walked up to Barbara and murmured some words to her. She got up and followed him out of the apartment, and Richard was left with Lisa. They stood face to face. "What was my sin?" Lisa queried as she fought back tears welling up her eyes. Richard stood face down, avoiding any chance to meet her gaze. "Don't just stand there. Answer me," she yelled at him. Richard told her that there was nothing to talk about, pleading with her to let things be and not create a scene. This infuriated Lisa, and she closed the gap between them as she squared up with him. "Unless you don't want a scene, you better start talking. Where did I wrong you, Richard? Tell me," she yelled at him. "Because you are perfect." "There, I said it," Richard said. Lisa couldn't believe her ears. "You have no fault. You don't argue, and never have you challenged my opinion. Everything I say was right. There was no room for misunderstanding. That was not what I wanted my woman. I needed someone who could challenge me, someone who can disagree with me even when I was right. Everything was just too easy with you and I couldn't take it any longer, so I saw a chance and took it." Lisa listened with disbelief. She couldn't believe all she just heard from Richard. "How is this a crime against me? Please make me understand," she asked, staring intently into his eyes as though she was trying to find the answer there. Richard explained that she didn't wrong him, but she just wasn't the kind of girl he wanted. "Barbara is a perfect description of everything I want in a woman. I am sorry, but there was nothing I can do about it." He finished and looked away with guilt. "Wow," was all that left Lisa's lips as she stood there staring at Richard, tears drenching her cheeks. She no longer fought back the tears. It didn't matter anymore. "Please, I don't mean to hurt you, but there was no other way to do this," said Richard. "Of course there's nothing wrong with that," said Lisa. "You should have at least let me be in peace than inviting me here to make a fool of me before your guests, or was it part of your assumptions that my heart was made of steel?" Richard tried to defend himself, but she continued, "Why lead me on for 5 years when you knew you never loved me?" Richard's heart sang with guilt. He never thought the situation would turn out this way. He apologized to Lisa, explaining that he never realized how cruel what he did to her was. He tried to hold her hand, but Lisa pulled free and backed off from him. She told him between sobs how she had built her world around him. "We never argued or had issues because you were perfect to me. I loved you too much to see a fault in you," she sobbed. "But now I have to learn a bitter lesson the hard way." She wiped her tears with the back of her palm and straightened up, regaining her composure. "I refuse to let you change me. This is who I am, Richard. I love from the heart, and no man, not even you, can change that. It is funny how life can be fair to some, but rude to others. With all your sweet words that melted my heart, and I thought for one moment that you were the perfect man for me. How wrong I was to live in the dreamland. I will have to pick up my pieces, and learn to live with this reality. But I strongly believe that there's someone out there that will love me for me," said Lisa. She turned and walked to the door, and just as she reached the doorknob, she stopped and turned towards Richard. "For what it's worth, I don't regret loving you. It's been 5 years of extraordinary experience, and believe me when I say that I cherished every single moment we shared together." Lisa smiled innocently as she continued to stare at Richard. "Goodbye, Richard. It's been a pleasure knowing you." She finished and opened the door, and walked out of the apartment. "I'm sorry, Lisa. I truly am. I never knew your worth until now. Please forgive me," Richard said softly as he slowly walked towards Lisa, tears welling up his eyes. But it was too late for apologies because Lisa had already shut the door behind her. Yes, she had shut the door to her past and walked away, holding her shoulders high. A sudden feeling of excitement replaced the sorrow that once filled her heart. Somehow, Lisa began to anticipate. All her life, she had known no man other than Richard. What if there was someone out there who would think differently of her? She thought, oblivious of people passing by as she walked triumphantly down the alley. Lisa smiled as she let the rush of fresh air fill her senses, drawing a deep breath. There was too much to live for, so much ahead of her. A new day has come, and Lisa just couldn't wait to embark on a life of adventure.